Our first story is from Febin. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord, and it was glorious. Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stink drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her, and so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away, before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners, the lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $8,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and, with the market the way it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices and soared recently and rents had gone up a lot, whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else, and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $2,000 each. They didn't need the money. It is pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered. We moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture and borrowed ornaments, and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt smaller. Smell. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors, because it smells like all the neighbourhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Neighbourhood. We obtained a mouldy old couch and dumped in front yard of the neighbour across the road, with permission of course. Neighbourhood X2. We started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. Neighbourhood X3. We called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbour set up a BBQ in their front yard, and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles, wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told every couple of weeks or so they have an after-party morning, and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greed bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $3,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. For all the people who are saying they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady died, average rent for a house that size had only gone up by about $40. Nowadays, four-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 per week. Absolutely brilliant. That's a really good pro story. I think the entire world needs more friends like OP. The effort OP went through is heartwarming. Kudos to her and her friends. The second story is from Tots Two Hots. When your racket with the local cops bites you in the ass internationally. This happened a few years ago when I was serving overseas with the US military. The location I was at was in a poorer area. There's a fair number of panhandlers, a lot of petty crime, and just people doing stupid crap. Well, one racket that goes on in this area, and apparently in other areas of the country too, is the local cops incentivize reporting vehicles with out-of-date inspection stickers. Apparently, they give these people access to the inspection database if they think the sticker is fake or stolen, which actually does happen. If you drive a motorcycle, one of the things they tell you when you're in process is to keep the sticker in your wallet and not on the vehicle, or else it'll just get peeled off. Anyway, what these people will do if they find a car with an out-of-date sticker, or if they run the plates and find it's out of date, they will jimmy the door open, steal every single thing out of the car, and leave a note that they've taken it to the police station. The idea is that you show up at the police station to get your stuff, and they force you to pay the fine for an overdue sticker, and then give you a deadline for an inspection, or else you'll get another fine. Well, I came out to my car one morning, and lo and behold, there was a note on my seat saying that all my stuff was at the local police station, because my inspection sticker was fake, and I had to go get it. No, not only am I late for work, my kid is also going to be late for school because there's no bus, and I have to drive her every morning on my way. Also, my inspection sticker is not out of date, so I have no idea what's going on. Now here's the thing that was extremely problematic was I had put my passport and my wife kids in the glove box because I was taking them to the base to get some paperwork done, as well as grab some paperwork for my wife to apply for a new passport because hers was expired. I'm very forgetful, so I put them in the night before and made sure the car was locked. Yeah, dumb mistake. Anyway, I get to the station, ask them what the heck was going on. And then, when I have them look at the inspection documents that the guy had taken, which clearly stated the car had been inspected and was current, they apologized and told me that they would give my things back, and I had to wait there for a second. I asked to file a police report for theft, but they looked at me like I had three heads and told me nothing was stolen, even though somebody broke into my car and took my things. This is when a light bulb went off in my head, and this might fall into the unethical category. The guy had taken official US passports, which might be a problem, but probably nothing would come of it since they were turned right into the police. However, I asked him where my wife's passport was. They told me that whatever is there is there. I said I needed a police report because I needed to contact the US Embassy about a stolen passport, and the fact that this police station would know exactly who the person was that stole it because they had dropped off my things that morning. I have never seen someone's attitude change as quickly as that cop's attitude changed. He tried to talk me out of filing a police report, but I was pretty insistent, so I went ahead with the police report, and then I did contact the embassy and reported the passport stolen and gave them all the information of the police station, and when I got the police report, I emailed it to them as well. Wound up getting a free passport out of it for my trouble. The embassy told me they were going to handle it, and from what I heard, the person who broke into my car actually got arrested and fined and was looking at additional charges because he stole foreign documents. Really would have liked to have been a fly on the wall when one of the local cops rolled into wherever he was at and told him to come with them. I don't feel bad at all. Hopefully, dude learned his lesson, and I did not have any further issues until I PCSD home. The revenge was perfect because the thief unknowingly escalated his petty crime into an international incident by stealing US passports. BTW, the small crime of the thief made him an international thief. Wasn't it a promotion for the thief? Our third story is from Lone Ranger. Stepdad cheats on my mom, so we get revenge. Initials for clarity. Me, 24M. Me, my mother, 50F. Mum, my brother, 23M. Bro, my sister, 30F. Sis cheating. Stepdad, 45M. Chris, stepdad's co-worker, 25F. Betty, the other woman, 40F. Darla. This may be a long one. Apologies in advance. I moved in with my mom after her marriage of 25 years with my bio dad was ended. He was a manipulative asshole, but that's another story. Shortly after the divorce, my mom introduced me to her boyfriend at the time, Chris. Now, my mom worked as a correctional officer at the county jail. The boyfriend was a former inmate, in for a DUI. That should have been the first red flag, but my mum was grieving a long marriage, and I didn't want to push the subject. Chris seemed to make her happy, and that was enough for me. Me, bro and sis all moved in with mom and Chris, and we seemed to get along okay. Chris and I bonded a bit over our love of video games, and all seemed well. That is, until 2017. Due to Chris's prior DUI, he had to go in regularly for probationary checkups at the courthouse. One day, he didn't return, and we got a little worried. We then received a phone call from him from Texas. Turns out, when he arrived at the courthouse of that day, he was jumped by the FBI. His family from Texas was implicated on a number of gang and drug-related crimes, and due to a situation where he was in a vehicle during a drug handoff, he was on the hook as well. He ended up agreeing to testify against his family members in exchange for a shorter sentence and allowed to be out of prison before the trial. My mom was distraught, and over the course of many phone calls over a year, they worked out their marriage plans when he returned. His store owner at the DQ he worked at allowed him to come back as well, back to his store manager position. Soon after, the drinking started. Now obviously, because of his DUI, Chris was clearly no stranger to drinking. He began to drink more and more, to the point where he was consuming half a 24-pack of beer a day. Chris was a mean drunk. He regularly started fights when wasted, and while they never got physical, he wasn't exactly kind with his words. My mom enabled his behavior for several years, saying the stress was getting to him from work and from the upcoming trial. Finally, after several years, my mom had enough. Chris came home extremely drunk one night, and my mom confronted him. She asked if he'd been drinking, and when he didn't deny it, she kicked him out. He went to live with a friend temporarily. The next morning, Mom asked us to help gather a few of his essentials so that he didn't have to re-enter the home until he was sober. While we were gathering his things, we heard a knock at the front door. We opened it to find Betty, one of Chris's co-workers, and someone I went to high school with. She told my mom she had something important to share. After sitting my mom down and telling her not to share where she got the info from, Betty told my mom about how Chris was cheating on my mom with Darla, how he regularly had Darla perform sexual acts in and around his workplace, how Betty had caught them, and how Chris told her that if she ever told my mum, he'd fire her. He was the store manager. And finally, how Darla was pregnant. My mom was angry. After the initial shock wore off, she told us to round up all of Chris's things and to dump it outside. We took everything of his out of the house and tossed it all in the alley behind our house. Chris had no reason or ability to return to the house. It was rented, with only my mom on the paperwork, so no issues there. In the meantime, she called and confronted him. He confessed to the entire affair, and that he was happy. Darla was pregnant because that meant he'd finally have a child of his own. Mum refused to have more kids. We three were massive strains on her body. She likely wouldn't survive anymore. He refused to apologize for any of his actions. My mom arranged for him to collect his items from the alley, with an officer present, and he left our lives. The revenge. Now, my mom clearly wanted to dust her hands of him and move on. She was already quite emotional from the whole ordeal and wanted nothing more from him. But sis bro and I had other ideas. First, we called his workplace. DQ operates as an independently owned franchise, and the owner of this branch owned several branches in the area. He was also a good friend. We informed him of the sexual acts being performed on the premises, and he went the processes of getting Chris booted from his position and barred him from any of the branches in the area. Funnily, Betty got his position after he left and now runs a tight and clean ship. Chris no longer had a job or a place to live, and so went to live with Darla in a town about an hour away. We found out that he started working at another DQ in that town and informed the owner of that location of the situation. It took significantly longer, due to there being no current indecent actions occurring there, but eventually he lost that job too. Soon after, Chris began driving around our neighborhood, seemingly stalking my mom and our family, probably because of his job loss. Now, due to the whole situation in Texas, he never had his probation lifted for his DUI and thus still did not have a license. He never had to drive when he lived with us, since work was local and we could drive him as needed. But here was, clearly driving around by himself when he shouldn't be. We contacted the police and informed them about Darla's vehicle in our neighborhood and that we believed Chris was driving it without a license. We told them to pull over the vehicle next time they see it, as it would likely be C driving again. Sure enough, a few weeks later, we were told that Chris indeed was pulled over and sent back to the local jail for driving without a license and while intoxicated. The police also did a search of the home he was staying at and found several guns at the premises. Since he was a felon, he was not legally allowed to have weaponry on the premises, meaning there was more jail time tacked on. By the time his jail time had finished, it was just in time for him to be sent back to incarceration in Texas for the trial. Chris's son was born while Chris was in prison. Darla evidently realized what an absolute ass Chris was and cut ties with him while he was in prison. During his prison time, Chris started sending tons of letters to my mom, stating how sorry he was, pleading to take him back, and ranting about how it wasn't his fault, all in the same letter, mind you. Mom burnt every one of them. We moved on, moving out of state. Chris evidently got out of prison some years ago and now lives in Kansas, struggling and fighting child support, which Darla sued him for. Mom now has a new boyfriend who treats her right and cares a lot more than Chris ever did. Bro and sis moved on and out, and I still live with Mom, assisting her with the newly purchased home that we've been renovating. Life's looking okay. I was reminded of this by a chat with a co-worker about cheaters and thought to post it here for others to enjoy. I'm glad it worked out well, but I also think you got a bit lucky. A felon with guns at home, driving around your neighborhood drunk, probably stalking your mum. That could have gone south and bad. BTW, the revenge was pro and long-lasting, ensuring the felon get what he deserved. Bye-bye for now. Let's see you tomorrow.